I'm Christopher Clark, and I'm traveling the world to discover its true treasures, the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The riches of nature and culture come together in Africa. This is a continent of mysterious places, seasoned institutions, and rituals whose power has survived centuries of turbulence and change. Great empires rose and fell here, and what they left behind is a legacy that belongs to all of us. Our shared history, the history of humankind, begins on this continent, Africa. It borders, like Europe, on the Mediterranean Sea. In that sense, Africa is Europe's geographical neighbor. But the transformation that took place here in Egypt 5,000 years ago would have been unthinkable in the Europe of that era. With the empire of the pharaohs, a sophisticated state emerged with a ruling dynasty, officials, laws, priests, scholars, and an army. Egypt became one of the most stable empires in world history. The Great Pyramid at Gizeh, built by the pharaoh Cheops 4,500 years ago, is the only one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world that is still completely intact. As they say in Egypt, everyone fears time, but time fears the pyramids. I'm traveling to East Africa, which is home to a particularly diverse group of peoples and cultures. Egypt, with its legacy of the pharaohs, Ethiopia with its imperial tradition and ancient Christian roots, Kenya and Tanzania with their dazzling landscapes. But for now, I'm staying in Cairo, with its pyramids on the edge of a desert. The pharaohs weren't the only ones who left their mark here. The Fatimids, later the Mamluks, the Ottomans, the French and the British. Only in 1956 did the last British troops leave the country, and under nearly all of these rulers, Cairo grew. The city's historic district has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1979 and is the largest medieval city where traditional lifestyles are still part of everyday life. When the great Arab scholar Ibn Khaldun came to Cairo in the 14th century, he called the city the Garden of the Universe and the metropolis of the world, and its Arabic name, El-Qahira, means the glorious one. For centuries, Cairo was the religious and economic center of an empire that extended from Morocco deep into the Middle East. And today, with its 20 million inhabitants, it's the largest city of the African continent, a sprawling urban beast in whose heart you can still see exactly what Ibn Khaldun must have meant. Today, at the Khan el-Khalili Bazaar, you can still feel the many influences that shaped this city over the course of history. The Arab, the African and Asian worlds all left their mark here. Trade has flourished in Cairo since the 14th century. And right next door is the Al-Azhar Mosque, the religious heart of the Islamic Old Town. This mosque in the middle of the old city of Cairo was founded over 1,000 years ago. The university established here soon after is the second oldest university in the world. Many of the most important schools of contemporary global Islam come together in this institution, which continues to wield a profound influence on Islamic thought. And today, worshippers from the adjacent quarters of the city come to this place for the midday prayer, just as they did 1,000 years ago. But Al-Azhar is also a center of Islamic scholarship. Men have come here to learn for centuries, and since 1961, so have women. The theologians and council members here are involved in important religious and socio-political decision-making processes. According to Egyptian law, Al-Azhar is responsible for protecting and tending to the interest of Muslims. The head of Al-Azhar is known as the Grand Imam, and his position is one of the most respected in Sunni Islam. Al-Azhar was only the second mosque constructed here. In later centuries, Cairo would be known as the city of 1,000 minarets. From Cairo, I'm sailing up the Nile. At 6,695 kilometers, it's the longest river in the world. Nilos was the name the Greeks gave to the deity that supposedly inhabited this great river. Even 5,000 years ago, the Nile was already an important transport route. Today, it is taking me to Abu Simbel, to the temples of Ramses II, built in the 13th century BC in Nubia, near the border with Sudan. Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great, was the most successful pharaoh of all time. His ascension to the throne marked the beginning of a golden age, and he reigned for an incredible 66 years. His rule was marked by record harvests and conquests, and he fathered 100 children. No wonder he had his own likeness carved into the rock face 4 times. His talent for self-promotion knew no bounds. The temples of Abu Simbel are the most important sign of his power. This was where, for the first time in the 13th century, the pharaoh had himself depicted as a ruler possessing the dignity of a god. Here at the entrance, he welcomes us. Inside, he sits as a god among gods. Twice a year, visitors are treated to an extraordinary spectacle. It's very rarely possible to visit this magical place alone. It's usually packed with tourists. But today I get to experience the full enchantment of this temple for myself. Its 3 enormous halls lie 63 meters deep in the rock face. Enormous statues stand guard in the entrance hall, and naturally, all of them have the face of Ramses. On Ramses' birthday and coronation day every year, and only then, sunbeams fall directly into the depths of the temple. For 15 minutes, the sun god Ra, Ramses himself, and Amun, the god of fertility, are lit up in brilliant sunlight. Even back in the era of Ramses II, the Egyptians were gifted astronomers, and we can assume that this miracle of the sun was a precisely planned event to honor the shining sun of Egypt, Ramses himself. The reliefs and frescoes in this temple depict Ramses as a great and brutal general. In reality, the Battle of Kadesh, shown here, ended in a draw, or possibly even a defeat. Ramses signed the very first peace treaty in the history of the world with his primary enemies, the Hittites. But in his temples, the ambiguities are edited out. He appears as the victor, an exemplar of pharaonic prowess. 2 themes above all dominate these scenes: violence and sacrifice. Ramses defeats his enemies. He punishes and humiliates them. His foot presses the face of a Libyan warrior into the earth. It's a world in which violence and power are closely intertwined. But the power of Ramses is also a bridge between the human and the divine. In another scene, he sits among the gods. As a human king, he renders sacrifice to the gods. As a god, he accepts sacrifice from himself. No other pharaoh built more monuments than Ramses II, and gigantomania was still in play in the 20th century when an enormous project practically obliterated parts of Egypt and its cultural heritage. Abu Simbel was nearly lost in the floods that submerged large swathes of Nubia. That was in the 1960s when the country's president, Gamal Abdel Nasser, commissioned the construction of a dam in Aswan, the size of which the world had never seen before. The dam was under construction for 10 years, nearly as long as it had taken to construct a medium-sized pyramid thousands of years before. The reservoir dam was intended to control the massive volumes of water on the Nile River, and the turbines were supposed to provide electricity for the entire country. The dam created an enormous lake with entire villages and countless archaeological treasures still resting beneath its surface. The temples of Abu Simbel might also have fallen victim to the floods if UNESCO hadn't started a campaign to save them. The water rose higher and higher and would eventually have swallowed up the temple complex entirely. UNESCO decided to save it, launching a donation campaign that was unparalleled at the time, collecting funds from over 50 countries to allow this piece of cultural heritage to be dismantled and rebuilt in a higher location. The complex was sawn apart into more than 1,000 blocks weighing up to 30 tons each. An international consortium, under the direction of a German construction firm, was charged with the technical realization of the project. It was a beautiful example of how nations can work together to save a piece of shared cultural heritage. Above all, we owe our thanks to the thousands of laborers who worked here over the course of 4 years.
Once the entire temple had been sewn into blocks, we drilled holes in the individual pieces and finally put them back together. It was all really demanding work.
Are you proud of the part that you played in this great project, this UNESCO project, rescuing Abu Simbel?
Yes, I'm proud to have been part of it. We had a huge goal to achieve.
And is this... Yeah.
Yes, that's my name.
Ah, that's you. Abdul Ghafoor. Abdul Ghafoor Mohammed Ibrahim.
This is my certificate. But it wasn't just an honor. Luckily, I also earned money.
Okay. Abu Ghafoor regales me with tales of his time on the construction site for a while longer. The new location of the temple was 64 meters higher than the original site and 180 meters further inland. The most difficult part was rebuilding the temple in such a way that the miracle of the sun would still happen twice a year. But they succeeded. The second, smaller temple of Abu Simbel was also relocated and saved. It is dedicated to Ramses' queen, and here the pharaoh shows us his human side. Ramses, strong in truth, beloved of Amun, created this divine abode for his beloved royal wife Nefertari, reads one of the inscriptions on a pillar. Originally, every wall inside this temple was supposed to be decorated just like this one, but the project was abandoned. You can still see here the cartoons, the drawings that show where the workers were going to engrave into the rock, and the last cuttings can be seen just here. This was a work in progress. The temple is an enormous memorial to Ramses' love and respect for his wife, and it brings to mind the myth of Isis and Osiris. Isis was the goddess who made the Nile the source of all life. She married her brother, King Osiris, whom she loved more than anything else in the world. When he died, she brought him back to life, and when he finally disappeared into the underworld for good, Isis's tears caused the river to flood. This process has been repeated every year since then, bringing fertility to the desert through which the Nile flows. The collective remembering and retelling of stories is a central feature of all societies, but especially of those whose culture is preserved in oral traditions rather than in print. Since the 14th century, the Al-Sirah al-Hilaliya epic has been passed from one generation to the next, though today only a few Egyptian families are left who continue to cultivate this tradition. The epic itself, together with the music that accompanies it, is among the traditions recognized by UNESCO as intangible world cultural heritage. Across broad expanses of the African continent, as far as Mali, Niger and the Sahara, the epic has been known for many centuries. It tells the story of a Bedouin tribe that crosses parts of the Arab world. Honor and revenge are central themes, as are wars and romantic entanglements. It's a kind of song of the Nibelungs, except that this epic plays out on the Nile, not on the Rhine. The stories have been passed down in this family for 10 generations. 3 generations are singing and playing together here. The Al-Hilali epic is their life, an important part of their identity. It would take several days to perform the entire epic in full. After all, the story is about a long journey through many countries. Some of the instruments are among the oldest in the world. So tell me, what is the name of this instrument and what's it made of?
My name Rababa.
Oh yes?
Rababa, this is horse.
Horse, this is horsehair?
Yes, horse. It's horse.
This is also horsehair, okay.
This fish.
This is made of fish skin?
Yes, fish. This?
And this?
Coconuts.
That's the shell of a coconut?
Coconuts.
And could you play something for us? How many people get the chance to play an old rababa, albeit very badly, with a Hilali family? With the rhythms of the Egyptian epic still ringing in my ears, I continue my journey into the highlands of Ethiopia. I had no idea how green and fertile it would be. In this part of the country, gravel roads and farm tracks lead to scattered villages where a handful of tribes still live cut off from the outside world as smallholder farmers, like most Ethiopians. They provide for themselves with a few cows and goats and small patches of cultivated land. Ethiopia, one of the oldest nations in the world, only came very briefly under European control, and this is one reason why so many of its traditions have been preserved. Once racked with crises, Ethiopia has undergone major structural changes and the economy is growing. But it remains one of the poorest countries of the world, and here in the highlands, things are still pretty archaic in many ways. Goats are an important commodity. When a girl marries, her dowry is often paid in goats, and as in all business deals, the price is negotiable. If there is one thing that nearly all Ethiopians have in common, it is a deep religious faith. 90% of Ethiopians belong to one religious group or another, and nearly half are Christian. Ethiopia is one of the oldest Christian countries in the world. In the mountain village of Lalibela, 2,500 meters above sea level, we can see how deep these Christian roots truly go. I'm in Jerusalem, but not in Israel or Palestine. I'm in the highlands of Ethiopia, where Emperor Lalibela once planned to create a second Jerusalem. Christianity came to Ethiopia in the 4th century, and since then the religion has played an incredibly important role here. You can feel its influence everywhere. There are thousands of churches and monasteries scattered throughout the country, and the oldest of them are here in this town, which is named after the Emperor Lalibela. When Saladin, the Islamic military commander, conquered Jerusalem 800 years ago and blockaded the pilgrimage route into the Holy City, Lalibela decided to create an African Jerusalem. It became a holy place, its own unique cosmos, where religion and history flow together to form an inviolable whole. You can feel that energy in every moment you spend here. The churches of Lalibela, built in the 12th and 13th centuries, have been called the 8th wonder of the world. But can we really say they were built? They weren't erected from stone or built from the ground up, after all. In fact, it was the other way around. They were carved into the rock face from top to bottom and then hollowed out. A wonder indeed. If the sandstone cliffs in this area weren't so soft and easy to work with, the 11 churches of Lalibela, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, would never have existed. As you can see, these churches had to be carved out of the living stone. Of course, every single detail had to be precisely planned before the chisel even touched the stone. Archaeologists say it must have taken at least 40,000 laborers to complete the churches in the 24 years in which they were supposedly built. We'll never know exactly how these marvels came into existence. According to legend, King Lalibela had a divine vision in which God told him to construct these rock-hewn churches. At night, hosts of angels came down to continue the building. In Ethiopia, by contrast with most of the rest of Africa, the stories and the oldest legends passed from generation to generation have Christian roots. Lalibela is the religious heart of Ethiopia, attracting pilgrims from around the country. The Sunday service is particularly impressive. It is 5 o'clock in the morning as the congregation gathers. This Ethiopian Orthodox service will last more than 5 hours. Even up here, the air is heavy with incense. The church has made an exception for us, and we're permitted to attend the service. We feel as though we've stepped down into an early Christian world we thought had disappeared long ago. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is the largest of the pre-colonial Christian churches in Africa. The church counts approximately 35 million faithful among its members. These African churches are among the oldest religious institutions in the world. The liturgical language is Old Ethiopian, and their books are written in an alphabet that is over 3,000 years old. The high point of the service is the priest's blessing of the congregation. For the Christians of Africa and their descendants around the world, the rock-hewn churches of Ethiopia carry great symbolic and emotional weight as evidence of the continent's long religious and cultural history. Of course, Ethiopia's history isn't just about religion. Power has also played an important role. The old imperial city of Gondar, on the edge of the Simien Mountains in the northwest of the country, bears witness to that fact. According to legend, a heavenly messenger appeared to Emperor Fasilides and commanded him to build a castle. Fasilides obeyed, making Gondar his residence. He modestly named this fortified city Fasilgebbi, after himself, of course. For centuries, the Ethiopian emperors traveled the country with their royal households and their heavily armed military. Much like Charlemagne in Europe, they were emperors on tour. Appearing in person was the only way for them to demonstrate their sovereignty. They lived in enormous tent cities like nomads, until, that is, Fasilides I arrived on the scene. He founded Ethiopia's first capital city here in 1636, and he wanted to ensure that the power of the Ethiopian emperors was finally set in stone, so to speak. They looked something like the medieval fortresses of Europe. Missionaries from Portugal brought the Baroque elements to Ethiopia, and over the centuries, these Baroque details were joined by many others, from the East, from India, and the Arab world. Here we can see Ethiopia's cultural diversity as if through a lens. The palace recalls one of the golden ages of Ethiopian history, an era of stability and sophisticated craftsmanship. Art and literature flourished, libraries were built, and Gondar became a complex, cosmopolitan city in which people of different ethnicities and religions got along tolerably well. When it comes to their festivals and celebrations, today's Ethiopians are keen to live up to the pomp and circumstance of past eras. Ethiopian Christians firmly believe that they are in possession of the Ark of the Covenant, containing the 10 Commandments. And even today, every church in Ethiopia keeps a replica of the Ark, which is paraded for the congregation during services. An early ruler, the legendary Queen of Sheba, is said to have conceived a child with Solomon, the king of Israel, in Jerusalem. The child's name was Menelik, and he was the forefather of all Ethiopian kings. He supposedly captured the Ark and carried it to Ethiopia. This is the New Year's festival of the Ethiopian Church. It takes several days, but today is called 𝘣𝘦𝘴𝘵, the Day of St. John. It's about John the Baptist, the man who represents the bridge between the Old and the New Covenant, the Old and the New Testament. It's a very beautiful and dramatic festival, and it's one of the most fascinating things about it is that these people are not Christian because they were converted by Western missionaries in the 18th and 19th centuries. This is one of the original Christian churches. Why did Ethiopia become a Christian country so early? The ancient kingdom of Aksum maintained a close trade relationship with the Romans. In the mid-4th century, the ruler of Aksum at the time converted to Christianity, which had become the established religion in Rome under Constantine the Great. But Ethiopia also identified strongly with the biblical Israel. They adopted Jewish rituals and certain religious rules regarding cleanliness and food, which still apply today. And these ingredients were blended with African traditions, ancient chants, and a dose of joie de vivre. Ancient Ethiopia is still alive and well in Gondar, and it's a visible part of daily life. The entire region is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I'm on my way to the 𝘣𝘦𝘴𝘵 Monastery. Its name means Trinity on the Mountain of Light. The monastery was consecrated in 1694, and the paintings in its basilica are world famous. This church in Gondar, 𝘣𝘦𝘴𝘵, is a treasury of images from the Bible and from pious legends, but particularly interesting and fine is this picture here, which shows Iyasu I, the emperor of Ethiopia, the grandson, incidentally, of Fasilides, who is lying at the foot of the cross on which Christ is crucified. And you can see he's placed his crown on the ground as a sign of his respect. And particularly striking is the stream of blood that you can see passing down the cross, where it touches and awakens a stylized skull. That is the skull of Adam, the original Adam. And so what this image is really representing is the connection, the bridge between the old Adam and the new Adam, Jesus Christ. And that is, in fact, a feature of Ethiopian Christianity in general, that linkage between the old and the new is always central. The old covenant is never left in the past, it's always carried forwards into the present. Heads of winged angels look down on visitors, even from the wooden ceiling of the monastery. The famous wall and ceiling frescoes are among Ethiopia's most valuable cultural treasures. Gondar, with its churches and palaces, is a truly unique ecosystem of traditions that deserves to be protected. And thanks to UNESCO, it will be. This basin was more than just a swimming pool for the emperors. Baptisms were also carried out here. The Ethiopian rulers took a few liberties with Christian values in other areas, though. As soon as a new ruler ascended the throne, his brothers and all of his other male relatives would suddenly disappear behind bars in a mountaintop prison for the rest of their lives. The idea was to prevent anyone from usurping the throne. It wasn't until an emperor died that the next in line to the throne was released from prison. The others had to stay put, and usually they ended up dying in confinement. Ethiopia is more than just a country of mythical emperors or the birthplace of an ancient Christian church. It's also home to the reason why Africa is considered the birthplace of humanity. Man-made climate change is one of the most burning issues of the 21st century, but the climate also changed long before humans ever inhabited the Earth. 6 million years ago, climate change gave evolution a decisive boost. Here in East Africa, there were once lush rainforests, and our ancestors, who still looked like apes, swung from tree to tree, until, suddenly, the drought arrived. Large swathes of vegetation died off, and our ancestors were forced to travel the longer distances between trees on the ground. By necessity, they had to learn how to walk upright. In 1974, fragments of a skeleton were discovered in Ethiopia. Scientists estimated that these fragments dated back 3.2 million years. They appeared to have belonged to a young woman of small stature, about 1.7 meters in height. This is how her skull looked, and it contained a brain that was already bigger than a chimpanzee's. The primordial mother of mankind had been found, and she was an Ethiopian. Today we know that the ancestors of modern humans also lived in Kenya and Tanzania. Kenya is my next destination. Millions of years ago, the climate changed slowly over eons. Today, that change is happening much more quickly, and the African continent has not escaped its effects. How much longer will this idyllic place, where animals roam free, continue to exist? The number of weather-based catastrophes has multiplied rapidly in the last 25 years, and yet here at Amboseli National Park, a UNESCO biosphere reserve, you still feel as though you are visiting a corner of paradise, even if the hyenas are on the lookout for the next antelope to feast on, and a large family of baboons is challenging another for the best tree. The habitat for animals in Africa is changing drastically as a result of industrialization, population growth, and climate change. Even the snow on the summit of Kilimanjaro has almost completely melted away. If average global temperatures increase by just 1.5 degrees Celsius, Africa could lose 30% of its plant and animal population. The number of lions in East Africa has dropped by half since the 1990s, and every time an animal species declines, nature has to compensate. Even the numerous hippos living in Amboseli National Park rely on this ecological equilibrium. They need enough water to cool their massive bodies during the day. Amboseli means salty and dusty. Volcanic ash from Kilimanjaro made the ground here like that. But as you can see, there's also a lot of water here, from the rain, of course, but also from the meltwaters of Kilimanjaro itself. And that's what makes Amboseli National Park, which is a UNESCO biosphere reserve, so unique. The elephants love the vast amounts of water in this place too. That's why there are so many of them here in Amboseli National Park. The ancestors of today's elephants, 350 different species of them, populated the continents of Earth about 55 million years ago, long before Homo sapiens existed. Researchers at the foot of Kilimanjaro are systematically studying elephant behavior and have been for nearly 50 years. Nora Njidiani knows almost every single animal in this area individually. Her work at the world-famous Elephant Research Project has given her a reputation as a sort of elephant whisperer.
Elephant lives in families, just like a human being. They live in families, but anyway, talking about family is only females, they stay the rest of their life with the family. But the males, they go independent. When they are 10 to 15 years, they leave the family. So the families consist of cousins, grandmothers, sisters. They live together the rest of their life.
The elephants here live for up to 40 years, which gives them ample time to pass their knowledge on to the next generation. As a result, the elephant herds of Amboseli are particularly stable. They are also carefully monitored and protected from poachers. Is climate change an important issue for you and for the elephants in this area?
We get water from Kilimanjaro, come underneath and push up the soil. And now, because
these are
it's
the
so
meltwaters
salty,
of Kilimanjaro.
It's very fresh. Water from Kilimanjaro is very fresh. But you come up in Amboseli, push this soil, and the soil is so salty, so it's killing the vegetation because of it's so salty.
And that puts food sources for all the animals, including elephants, at risk. When the last elephant dies, the earth will wither. Thus an ancient saying, meaning crimes against elephants are crimes against humanity, because the world grows poorer every time one of these marvelous witnesses to evolution is lost. 30,000 elephants are killed by poachers in Africa every year. Humanity's voracious demand for ivory continues unabated. At one time, millions of these creatures, now the largest living land animals, wandered the savannas of this continent. Today, only 400,000 of them remain. I'm beginning to understand Ernest Hemingway, who once wrote, "We had not left Africa yet, but when I would wake in the night, I would lie listening, homesick for it already." We are visiting the Masai people in their homeland around Kilimanjaro. The mothers of the young men in this tribe have gathered in the village. The most important ceremony of the year is happening today. They have made a huge exception in allowing us to attend. After training for 10 years, their sons have now earned the status of true warriors. The mothers sprinkle milk on their sons' heads and then shave them completely bald. For the mothers, this is a day to say farewell. For the sons, it means saying goodbye to their freedom and adventuring in the bush. Now it's time for them to take up their responsibilities, to start a family. Many of the boys struggle with the transition to manhood. They fall into a kind of trance, and their bodies seem to fight back. The natural narcotics they consumed in the bush during the previous month seem to play a role. At times it can look alarming, but the parents seem to take it in their stride, and the boys recover quickly enough. Once their heads are shaved, they are rubbed with red pigment, a sign that the young men are now fully fledged Masai warriors. In the past, new warriors had to kill a lion. Luckily, this tradition no longer exists. The initiation festival lasts several days and ends with this chant. First steps into a new life. UNESCO has listed these Masai rituals as intangible cultural heritage. Is it easy to sustain this tradition in the modern world, or are the Masai facing difficulties in keeping this tradition going?
We are just keeping this traditional to be going on. Yeah, we don't want to reduce.
No.
Yeah, you see, everyone, they like our traditionally, so we don't like to reduce that. It's just still going on and on.
But the Masai way of life is under threat. As herders, they used to own the best grazing land in Kenya and Tanzania. The expansion of the national parks and nature reserves has cut back their radius, and the Masai don't have a political lobby to represent their interests and concerns. Slowly but surely, they are being deprived of their livelihood. They face an uncertain future. The savanna, with its complex ecosystem of plants and animals, stretches across 40,000 square kilometers of East Africa, from Kenya to Tanzania and into the Serengeti. The Serengeti has been a UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site since 1981. More than 1.6 million herbivores and thousands of carnivores live here. The indigenous peoples call this region Serengeti, or endless plains. It's one of the last ecosystems in the world that is still largely intact. The 15,000 square kilometers of national park are strictly protected. The Serengeti is one of the most spectacular UNESCO World Heritage Sites in existence today. The natural world in this part of Africa doesn't have seasons like spring, summer, autumn, and winter. The climate is shaped by alternating dry seasons and rainy seasons. When the plains begin to dry out and fresh grass and water become scarce, everything here begins to move. The Great Migration begins. Twice a year, this place becomes the backdrop for a natural spectacle unparalleled anywhere in the world. It's one of the largest migrations on the planet. Every year, around 2 million gnus, zebras, and other hoofed animals follow the rain, traveling thousands of kilometers from south to north and back again. And where there's rain, there's also fresh grass. Predators follow the herbivores on their journey. It's an eternal cycle of eat and be eaten. This region is also under threat from climate change and a population boom. UNESCO watches over the Serengeti so that this paradise will be preserved for its residents and generations to come. In this fascinating region, interactions between human beings and their natural surroundings are increasingly fraught with new challenges. In the last few decades, growing numbers of people have moved to the fringes of the Serengeti, particularly the Masai herdsmen who graze their animals on the plains of the national park. Unfortunately, these domesticated herds compete with the wild animal populations of the Serengeti for scarce food resources, and climate change is another threat, meaning less precipitation, higher temperatures, and longer droughts. Kenya's incredible diversity is also on display along the coast of the Indian Ocean on the Lamu archipelago, far from the savannah and the big cities. A completely unique Swahili culture has developed here over the centuries. In the past, hundreds of these dhow boats would set off from here to ply the Indian Ocean trade. They traded with Arabia, Persia, and India, and all these influences are still palpable here today. The historic district of Lamu is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Gold, ivory, sandalwood, ebony, spices. The Swahili traded in all these goods, and they traded in human lives as well. The Swahili, whose name means coastal dwellers, were formidable slave hunters. Their language alone, a blend of Bantu and Arabic, struck fear into the hearts of those in the interior of the continent, where the Swahili captured their human prey. They shipped growing numbers of slaves across the Indian Ocean, but they also kept some for themselves to use as masons and artisans. Slaves built the city of Lamu, and they were an important pillar of the Swahili culture that is so admired today. For the elites of this region, the trade in and use of slaves became a kind of addiction. They simply couldn't manage without it. And after 1907, when slavery was banned altogether, Lamu entered a period of gradual decline. Lamu became so powerful that the island declared itself a city-state in the 14th century, independent of the Kenyan kings at the time. It all started with traders who settled here. The Swahili are their descendants. Arabian traders from Oman brought more than just goods to the island. They also brought Islam. Today, nearly the entire population of the island is Muslim. As you wander the labyrinthine alleyways of Lamu, you will still find doors that were carved by slaves. For thousands of years until the early 20th century, Lamu was a hub for the slave trade. Slaves were sent to the Orient rather than Europe, even after the formal abolition of the slave trade in the 19th century. The profits were simply too tempting. Trade in gold and ivory continued as well, of course, and with it came a lively cultural exchange. The 18th century palace of a successful merchant bears witness to this history. These little palaces look like something straight out of Tales of 1001 Nights, and they tell the story of a glorious past. Lamu on the east coast of Kenya is probably the most cosmopolitan place in the whole of Africa. The Swahili people who have lived here for over 2,000 years used to sail the Indian Ocean as traders, plying wares such as gold, tortoiseshell and quartz from the interior of the continent. But the city's real heyday didn't start until the 7th century, when here in East Africa, along this coast, the slave trade began. At least 15 million people were transported from here to the Islamic countries, to India and to China. Globalization did not begin in the modern era. It's humility, isn't it? Makes you feel very amazing.
This house lays testimony to those interactions between these people of the East African coast and their visitors who came to trade with them. For example, you have traditional timber artifacts whose technique is actually borrowed from the India. We have plaster motifs, most of which can be traced back to the Arabian Peninsula. You have Chinese porcelain that was imported from China, and Chinese pottery. So it's actually a testimony of that interactions between the East African coast and the rest of the world as from, say, the 14th century.
Lamu feels like a city from another era. There are no cars on the island and no mass tourism. When the people hold a festival, it feels as though a door has opened into the past. The Swahili dances on display here have existed for centuries. No one knows how long the Swahili culture will survive, but the people here are committed to keeping it alive, and UNESCO supports these traditions as intangible cultural heritage.
Swahili today continues to evolve. It is picking up a lot of, as usual, it's picking a lot of new contributions to constantly develop and enrich this culture that has always been known as the Swahili. So today it is really evolving, and it is picking new attributes that continue to be fused and to be part of the Swahili culture.
Egypt, Ethiopia and Kenya are just 3 of the 54 African states, but they capture something of the profound diversity and cultural resonance of this continent. The journey from Egypt through Ethiopia into Kenya confronts us on the one hand with the tremendous antiquity and historical depth of African institutions and cultures, and on the other hand with the sublime drama of African nature, a legacy of great value not just to Africans, but to the world. It's this symphony of history and nature that makes Africa unique. The real African miracle is that so much of value has survived the ravages of European imperialism. In this capacity to regenerate damaged cultures and societies, to move forward without breaking entirely the bond with the past, lies a bright prospect for Africa's future. Turn your face to the sun and the shadows will fall behind you.